Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Washed Up with a Kraken by Eldridge. Narrated by Krystal Hammond and Lance West. Prologue. Quinn. Remember, class, when in doubt, make sure you're not cutting through the meat. If you are, you're doing it wrong. Quinn set her butcher's knife on the bench and walked to the back sinks to wash her hands. The butchery unit wasn't her favorite, but it did give her a much greater respect for the meat she used. As she put her apron away and got packed up, she turned to see Chef Tramis approaching her. Chef Tramis was one of the top in her field, and she was killer with a knife. She came to the Culinary Institute of America to do workshops often, and Quinn always signed up. This class, they focused on breaking down an entire cow. By the end, Quinn had worked up a serious sweat. "Great job today, Quinn. You always try your best, and I like that about you." Quinn was gushing inside, but she tried her hardest to keep a calm, cool demeanor. "Thank you, Chef. Your workshops are always so informative." Chef Tramis smiled. "Thank you. Now tell me, how did the interview with Coastal Cruises go?" "Amazing. I was interviewed by Chef Wesley, and it seemed to go well." Coastal Cruise Lines was one of the top externships at the Institute. It wasn't like a regular cruise. It was a summer-long excursion to Hawaii, Singapore, Australia, Japan, and so many others. The cruise line set up workshops for hospitality and culinary students, where they could rub elbows with some of the top chefs in the industry. Plus, at the end, one or two got offered full-time positions. Not only did you get to travel for entire summers, but they paid so well there was no real reason to work for the rest of the year, even though Quinn probably would. That way, she could focus on working for herself as a private chef or caterer, so she wouldn't have to worry about working for the money. Almost every student at the Institute applied, but only 20 or so got interviews. Out of those 20, the cruise line only chose 4 or 5. Quinn was confident in her abilities, and she had worked so hard to maintain a perfect 4.0 GPA on top of taking every extra workshop she could. She even picked up extra shifts at the on-campus restaurants, just to experience every side. "Ah, yes," Chef Tramis continued. "Chef Wesley is a colleague of mine. Maybe I can reach out and put in a good word for you." Quinn's eyes widened. "Really? That would be amazing." "Consider it done. You're a hard worker, Quinn, and we need more of that in this industry." She thanked her, and just as Quinn turned to leave, she ran head first into her arch-nemesis. Yes, that may sound dramatic, but it was true. Brandon Cotley was an arrogant ass with a world-renowned chef as a father. He hadn't worked a hard day in his life. He skated by on his father's name and just assumed everything would be handed to him. "Oh, sorry. I guess you couldn't see me with your head shoved so far up Chef's ass." Quinn rolled her eyes, ignoring his comment, and walked around him. Over the years, she'd learned it was better to just walk away. Feeding into it only fueled the fire. To her great chagrin, he followed her out of the classroom and down the hall anyway. "So, now that you have Tramis vouching for you, you may actually have a shot. I guess I'll be seeing you a lot this summer. My father donated a few convection ovens to the kitchen, so there's no way I'm not going." "Of course," Quinn said. "It's not like there's any other way you would have gotten in." His face soured at that, and Quinn couldn't help but smirk, since he never put in any real effort. Pointing out he only gets anywhere because of his father always worked. To Quinn's delight, Brandon took the bait. "I could do it without him, but why not use the resources you're gifted with?" Was he kidding? Even though she knew the answer was no, It was hard to think anyone was that unaware, especially anyone around sharp objects as frequently as he was. Quinn rolled her eyes but kept walking, hoping he'd get the message. He, unfortunately, did not, and cut her off, stepping in front of her and planting his arm against the wall, blocking her in. "So, since we'll be seeing each other a lot this summer, maybe we can see each other for other things." He grabbed a piece of her hair, twisting it around his fingers. Quinn smacked his hand away and took a step back. "I think not. I'll be spending my time learning and absorbing. Any time I do have off, definitely won't be spent with you." Brandon huffed and stepped back. "Whatever. You're not even that hot. You should stop sampling so much of your own food." With that, he left. Thank God. Men like Brandon would never understand that a woman's entire ego didn't start or end with their opinions. Quinn shook off the interaction and made her way back to her dorm. She'd gotten lucky. Her roommate for the semester never showed, so she had the entire dorm to herself. It was the first time in her life she'd had her own space. She grew up in the foster system, where she always had to share with at least one other person. The woman who ran the home she was placed in wasn't mean or unkind, just uninterested. There were a lot of other kids, and Quinn was a recluse anyway, so it never bothered her. When she got older, she started assisting with preparing meals. While the menus were always limited, it was her favorite part of the day. Once she was old enough to work, she bussed tables at a nearby restaurant. She moved up quickly, eventually becoming a prep cook in the kitchen. The owner, Chef Dean, taught her proper knife cuts and different cooking techniques. Though it was just a diner, Chef Dean was talented, and she thanked her lucky stars for getting out of bussing tables. She worked hard until she was able to apply to the Institute and leave. Chef Dean celebrated her success with a miniature cake, which was the only congratulations she ever received. And then she headed off. She was almost done with her education, and as soon as she got the Coastal Cruises internship, she would get the job and finally get to travel, cook, and do everything she'd ever wanted to. 1. Quinn. Quinn pulled her small suitcase behind her, dragging it over the metal grate onto the ship. Her first and hopefully only plane ride had been quite the experience. She had been so worked up after her flight that she stayed up all night studying her notes. As soon as she could, she got out of that motel and hustled over to the ship, excited to finally get going. The ship was giant. It had to be at least 12 decks. She wasn't even sure how this thing was floating. It looked like an entire city. Stepping onto the main deck, she noted it was extremely empty. She could see a large pool over to the left and a bunch of loungers across the space, and a single fold-up table to the right, a man sitting behind it on his phone. He looked up with a quirked eyebrow as she joined him. "Hey, you new employee?" She nodded. "Kind of. I'm one of the Culinary students." "Perfect," he said, gathering some of the documents from the table. "Here's an employee handbook and some paperwork you'll have to fill out and give to the head chef before we set off. Galley check-in is on the 3rd deck, to the right after you get off the elevator over there. Welcome aboard." She took all her belongings and headed down. When the elevator opened, she was no longer in a place with wooden floors and bright colors. Instead, she was staring down a small white hallway with a bunch of corridors shooting off from it. With a deep breath, she made her way down the hall until she found an industrial kitchen. Everything was stainless steel and built like a maze. Quinn drooled over all the giant mixers and other appliances. She grimaced when she saw the convection ovens that looked extra shiny and never used, reminding her of Brandon's impending presence. Hello. She heard a voice call deeper into the kitchen. She moved through the maze to find a woman with dark hair and a strong face, already dressed in chef's whites. Hello, she said, her voice laced with a thick French accent. I'm Chef Moreau, the sous chef here in the main galley. This galley preps most of the meals for the ship, but there are small restaurants and cafes scattered across the ship that you will spend time working in as well. The better you do, the better job you will be positioned for. It doesn't matter how high your class rank is or who you know. Here, it's about how you perform. Is that clear? Yes, chef, Quinn said, almost militarily. Good. She turned to move through the kitchen, and Quinn assumed she was supposed to follow. When they stopped at a pile of manila envelopes, she whirled around to face Quinn again. What is your name? Quinn Piker. She perused them until she found one with her name on it. Okay, Quinn. Please have these filled out in the next few days. We have about a week until we board and set off. In that week, you will attend seminars covering everything you'll need to know while you're here. Basic skills like kitchen safety and interacting with guests. There is an itinerary in the packet. Your room number and the key are in there as well. The staff rooms are on the floor below. Your orientation seminar starts at 3, but you can go to your room and get unpacked until then. Yes, chef. Thank you. Chef Moreau nodded, and Quinn found her way back through the maze to the elevator, eventually making it to the staff quarters. The halls were much tighter than upstairs, only fitting one person at a time. The key to her room had to be jiggled in the lock, but once she got it open, she was actually surprised by the size of it. It was about the size of her dorm room back home, with 2 closets and a separate door she assumed was the bathroom. Honestly, she was relieved. She'd done some research, and some cruise ships had glorified closets for staff rooms. She set to work, putting all her belongings away, and claimed the bottom bunk before she checked the time. There were still a few hours until the orientation. Just as she was trying to figure out what to do to pass the time, the door opened, revealing a woman with pale skin and short red hair. Hey, are you my new roomie? She asked. She nodded. Looks like it. I'm Quinn. Quinn, nice to meet you. I'm Trina. She pulled in her bag and looked around. This is much bigger than I thought it would be. Quinn laughed. Yeah, I thought that too. I took the bottom bunk if you don't mind, and I left the closet to the left open. Fine with me. They made small talk while Trina unpacked. Trina had come from another culinary school in Colorado, but she had moved there from California. That's awesome, Quinn told her. This is actually my first time seeing the ocean. Really? Trina asked, clearly shocked. Quinn laughed softly. Really, I've never lived anywhere near the ocean, so I was excited when I received the offer. Well, we will definitely have to have a beach day when we have a day off, Trina decided, and Quinn smiled. She was definitely going to like it here. After they'd both showered and dressed in their chef whites for orientation, Quinn tucked her long hair into a low bun and slicked it back to keep it out of her face. Orientation was held in the main dining hall, all navy blue and gold with plush chairs and hardwood floors. The tables were pushed to the back, the chairs in rows. She found a spot right in the front as the room filled, eager to get started. The meeting moved quickly. It was mainly to inform everyone what they could expect for the next week before guests arrived, and some general housekeeping. Then, they were broken into their working clusters for the summer. Assessing her group, she realized her worst nightmare was coming true. Brendan was there, in her group. Quinn made a conscious effort to ignore him. Head chef Wesley, who she'd originally interviewed with, was leading her group. She looked up to him, so it was a dream to work under him. I expect everyone on my team to meet the highest of standards. I don't care if you're only prepping vegetables. I expect them to be perfect. Details are not to be overlooked, especially if you're even considering a job on board after you finish your schooling. He went on to explain that every morning at 4, all the kitchen staff would prep in the main galley. Then they would break off into their individual assignments. Chef Westley spent most of his time in the main galley, serving the main courses. That was the place Quinn really wanted to be. Not only would they be welcoming guest chefs from all over the world, but they would also be cooking the cuisines of the places they docked. It would give her the chance to experience tons of different cooking methods she'd never see at home. Don't think that just because you ended up in my group, you're going to work in the main galley, he continued. This week, we'll be cooking for the crew and learning menus. I expect you to treat this as if you were cooking for guests. After this week, I'll give out your assignments. I don't care who you are. Don't think I won't put you on buffet duty. Prove to me you belong here. Any questions? When no one spoke up, he nodded. See you tomorrow morning. So, together again, I guess, Brandon said as he sidled up to her. Maybe we should meet up tonight. You know, study up. I'm fine studying by myself, thank you. Without a backward glance, Quinn took her binder back to her room and got to work.
2. Jorah. Jorah leaned back from their desk, stretching their arms behind them. While they loved their job, doing admin work was the worst. They never thought owning their own business would be this boring. They always assumed being their own boss would be fun, and they wouldn't have to worry about things like this. They could hire an assistant, but they preferred to work from home and didn't like having strangers in their space. Their phone dinged on the desk, and they picked it up to find a text from Reka, telling them to come over ASAP. They called her instead. For someone who seemed to need their attention right away, it took her a long time to answer. I said come over, not call me, she said in lieu of hello. Some of us have jobs, they said, closing their laptop and stretching their tentacles under the desk. Oh, please, real jobs are overrated. Come over, I need to show you something. Jorah laughed. Even though they knew Reka worked hard as an artist, she always made jokes that she didn't have a real job. Fine. Let me finish a few emails, and then I'll be over. They hung up, sent a few emails, and wandered over to her place. It was only a few blocks away. Jorah lived on an island called Damona, cut off from the human world, where paranormal beings could live openly. Even then, they were the only Kraken living on the island. Krakens, by nature, were extremely independent and territorial. Krakens were few in numbers, and many mated based on strengthening their territory. Jorah was different, though. They didn't care about territory and hated solitude. They thrived in social settings and loved their plants and all their material possessions. So even on an island full of non-humans, they were a bit of a spectacle. After so long, the interest had worn off, but sometimes they could still feel eyes on them. Soon they were in front of Reka's door, which flew open before they could even knock. Geez, took you long enough, she snarked as she shut the door behind them. Reka, a water nymph with light blue skin and smaller fins for ears, had been Jorah's best friend for longer than anyone. Her father was a mage, so she had some human features other nymphs didn't, like her brown hair and freckles. Her hair was currently staked up with a paintbrush. I just finished this piece, and as soon as I was done, I knew it was for you. Jorah followed her through the house that they had designed themselves. Unlike their home, which was a more Mediterranean style, her home was more eclectic, with jewel tones everywhere. They looked at her living room, thinking about adding a mirrored mosaic. One side held her paintings, but the other was mostly bare. Maybe an accented wall with printed wallpaper and a large mirror would be more appropriate than a mosaic. Those wavy ones were very on trend, and it would fit the vibe perfectly. "Stop assessing my perfect home that I've already allowed you to rearrange 1,000 times and follow me," Reka said, pulling them from their thoughts. They huffed, but followed her down the hall to her studio, a space Jorah had never touched. Reka insisted the walls be left white so nothing would interfere with her process. They didn't understand the method to her madness. They didn't need to. Her art spoke for itself. "You ready?" she asked, walking over to the easel, a sheet draped over it like they were in a gallery. When they nodded, she tore it down to reveal something they weren't expecting. A colorful silhouette of a thick feminine figure. She was facing away, holding her hair off her back. It was painted like a heat map, in different hues of red and orange, with a blue strip where a thong would sit. They couldn't explain it, but something about the figure felt familiar, almost like home. That didn't make any sense. "I know it's not my style at all," she said, gesturing to her other paintings of landscapes with bright colors, "but it was like something inside wanted to make it. I don't know where you would put it, but it screamed you when I saw it." They looked at it for a moment, thinking about where they could hang it. "Actually," they said, "I think this would go perfect in my bedroom." There was a space on the wall across from their bed just begging for something. They had been saving it for something special, and this felt special. "Perfect! I'll wrap it up so you can take it with you. How's the hotel design going?" They sighed loudly. "Just as well as you can expect with Kingsley. He's particular about every small detail, down to the color of the light switches. I understand it's supposed to be a luxury hotel, but he seriously needs to chill." She laughed. "Isn't he, like, your highest-paying client?" They groaned. "Don't remind me. It's why I can let him go. Normally, I send him designs online, but since the project is here on the island, it feels like he's breathing even further down my neck." "Aw, poor baby," Reka snarked, earning a middle finger from Jorah. "Come on, why don't we order takeout and watch a movie? My treat." "Fine, but only if we order something other than Mexican. We've had it like every time." "But it's the perfect food," she whined. Jorah snickered and smiled. "What about the Thai place down the block? You love their green curry." She pouted but nodded. "Oh, and spring rolls." They laughed. "You got it."
3. Quinn. Prep week flew by in a storm of late nights and vegetable chopping. Every day, Quinn got up at 3:30 to get to the kitchen 15 minutes early, doing everything from inventory to prep work to dishes. Whatever she was asked to do, she did to the best of her abilities. Every day, she was shuffled into a different restaurant on the boat, getting a feel for each area. In the afternoon, they normally had some sort of meeting or seminar discussing proper kitchen safety or emergency procedures. After dinner, they would meet with their chefs to discuss the day and learn about upcoming cuisines. Once she was off, she would sit in bed, studying her binder, making sure she was ready for whatever position she ended up in the next day. Finally, Friday night rolled around, with guests arriving Monday. Tonight, they would get their assignments, then spend the weekend prepping. Quinn couldn't lie. She felt good after the week was up. She had worked hard and taken every piece of criticism she received to make herself better. Even if she didn't end up in the main galley, she was at least confident she wouldn't end up on buffet duty. They broke off into their groups, and everyone was on edge. Everyone except Brandon, that was. Being grouped with him this week was infuriating. He was constantly doing the bare minimum. He was normally late to morning prep, and he only did half the work everyone else was doing. On top of that, the work he did do was always sloppy. His knife cuts were never precise, and every station he prepped had missing items. Plus, he was always chatting with Chef Westley. Apparently, his dad and Chef go skiing together every winter. Chef finally joined them, sending the group into dead silence. "Listen up. I have everyone's assignments for the cruise. Remember that nothing is set in stone, and you could be moved at any time. Though I am who you report to, you need to listen to and get acquainted with the chef who runs the restaurant you'll be working in. All right, let's get into it. Diaz and Smith, you'll be upstairs at Bow. Tisdale, you'll be working at Casa Lucas." Chef continued like that, assigning everyone to different spots. Finally, he announced, "Piker and Goddard, you'll be with me in the main galley. The rest of you are floaters, most likely working between the buffets and running prep food." Quinn was gushing. She couldn't believe she'd made main galley. Samantha Goddard peered over at her and smiled. Quinn was just thrilled she wasn't paired with a slacker. Chef was continuing with instructions when he was suddenly interrupted. "I'm sorry, Chef. You forgot to call Cotley," Brandon said. "I didn't. You're part of the floater team," Chef replied. "But that doesn't make sense. You know who my dad is. I can't be expected to—" Chef cut him off. "If you have an issue with your placement, we can speak after the meeting. I placed people based on their skills this past week. Nothing more." Brandon stood there with his mouth agape, and Quinn had to cover her mouth to hide her amusement. Once the meeting was over, Brandon pulled Chef Westley aside and they got into it. Not wanting to see how that shit show would pan out, Quinn scurried back to her room, excited to study up on the first menu for the main galley. Quinn's weekend consisted of learning the first menu and the ins and outs of the kitchen. Dinner was the main meal served there, with 5 courses every night. The menu for now reflected the first stop, Hawaii. While Quinn loved the Simon dish the most, she was tasked with making cressata pastries, sort of like croissants, but covered in sugar and filled with Bavarian cream. Pastries weren't her favorite thing to make, but cressata were soft and fluffy and delicious. Brandon had been sulking around, still showing up late and being essentially useless. Even with his uselessness, by Monday, the kitchen was all ready to go, and the first service went off without a hitch. Everyone in the main galley was efficient and put together. Quinn had to work hard to keep up, but by the end of the night, she felt incredible. As she was walking down the hall to her room, she saw Brandon coming the other way, his chef whites covered in red sauce. "Hey, you okay?" "What's it to you?" he retorted. She held her hands up. "Never mind, then." He pushed past her, and she continued to her room, finding Trina there, brushing out her wet hair. Trina smiled as Quinn pushed into the room and closed the door behind her. "Hey, how was your first day?" She sighed a dreamy, happy sigh. "Amazing. It was everything I could have imagined and more. What about you?" Since Trina was a pastry chef, she was assigned to the patisserie on the main deck. "Great. We're making tons of strawberry mochi, and it's been the best." Trina paused for a moment. "Hey, you know the blonde guy in your group? The tall one?" Quinn quirked a brow. "You mean Brandon?" "Yeah, him. I guess he was working at the children's build-your-own-pizza place, and some kid threw a fit and knocked a whole container of sauce on him. I saw the whole thing." Quinn fell into a fit of laughter. "That's why he was covered in sauce in the hall. We go to the same school, and he's the worst.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?